Right now on Upfront.
Supreme ending.
It has been an honor to have served you.
Chief Justice Ann Walsh Bradley retiring, her 30 years on the state's high court coming to an end. But first, she's here.
How dangerous is that to the court?
It's dangerous to the court. It's dangerous to our form of government.
Our new interview, the state of the court, the politics, the money, and the liberal majority.
Increase security.
We're going to talk about it as a caucus. I think we made the right decision to increase security here.
The Minnesota shootings prompting increased security at the state capitol and a renewed debate about access and guns.
Open to longer-term conversations to ensure that everyone feels safe.
Now, Republican State Senator Chris Kapica with us. His push for more security and his opposition, what would get you to a yes, to his party's budget plan.
Conference of Mayors. The nation's mayors gathering in Tampa, including Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson. With so much to discuss, he joins us just moments away.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Just weeks now until Justice-elect Susan Crawford is sworn in, cementing the High Court's liberal majority.
Crawford replacing longtime Chief Justice Ann Walsh Bradley, who's retiring after 30 years on the bench. The court, in the midst of releasing its final opinions this term, this past week, unanimously backing Democratic Attorney General Josh Kaul in a case involving civil settlements and the Republican lame duck laws.
The court is anything but always unanimous, and we sat down this past week with Chief Justice Walsh Bradley in her final days on the court. At a recent public celebration at the state capitol, Ann Walsh Bradley reflected on 30 years. 30 years on the state's high court, ending as Chief Justice.
It's been a long way from the old Swamp Inn to serving as Chief Justice of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And I used that reference because my dad was a bartender, and in my early years he owned, or rather ran, a bar called the Old Swamp Inn, which was aptly named. It was old and adjacent to a swampy area. So that trajectory of ending my service here as Chief Justice of the Wisconsin Supreme Court is exceedingly meaningful.
We just celebrated Father's Day. I'm curious what you think your father would say about Chief Justice Ann Walsh Bradley.
He'd say, by golly, that's pretty good. That's what he would say.
Pretty good indeed.
Pretty good, he would say.
You mentioned at the celebration 28,000 cases. You roughly estimate you've heard 2,400 oral arguments, written 600 opinions. What is the most important case that this court has decided during your tenure?
I don't know if there's a single most important case. I guess I leave that to the analysts and the legal scholars to decide. But for me personally, cases that involve securing individual rights, holding government accountable, and cases and actions dealing with access to justice, making sure that the courts of this state are accessible to the people whom they serve.
Do you enjoy writing majority pieces or dissents more?
Oh, that's a great question. I've never been asked that. Writing dissents are much more fun. When I write majority opinions, it's very formal writing. And probably about 10 years ago, I thought to myself, set me free. In dissents, I'm going to start sentences on occasion with conjunctions. Oh my goodness, that's in the past, not really how formal writing would occur. Now, I know that sounds probably to most people a little unusual, but writing dissents, and I've had my opportunity to write many of them, really is a much more engaged writing, less formalistic.
Chief Justice Bradley has seen a lot of changes on the court. 2 years ago, retaking the liberal majority, swearing in Justice Janet Protasiewicz, and watching the two most recent, most expensive, and political court races in the country. How divided is this court today?
Well, there certainly are divisions. We see cases differently, but I'll tell you we're united in many ways. We are united in our understanding of the obligation that we serve the people of this state. We are united when we realize, and it is manifest, that we've taken an oath to uphold the Constitution. Now, we may see that differently, but serving the people of this state, we are united in that, and upholding the law, we are certainly united in that too.
When we look at the past several races, Justice-elect Crawford, Justice Protasiewicz, record spending, we've seen politics become involved, perhaps more so than in previous races. I think there's a lot of people out there who think justices are now just politicians sitting on the bench. What do you tell those people?
Well, we are all committed to the rule of law, but I understand your concern, and I've always had strong bipartisan support. Tony Earl, the Democratic governor, was my co-chair, who served along with Sue Ann Thompson, the then First Lady, Republican Governor Tommy Thompson. And that happened in my subsequent races also. Bipartisan support. That's harder to come by now, and that's obvious by the very question you ask, that what we've seen in the last election is lots of money and certainly greater division among the people.
How dangerous is that to the court?
It's dangerous to the court. It's dangerous to our form of government. One of the reasons that we can exist as an institution is because we have the public trust and confidence of the people.
You told me on the campaign trail that you want to take a look at how this can be changed in the future, and you said we cannot surrender our court system. You were referring to Elon Musk in those comments. How does that happen in elections moving forward?
It's difficult. People are looking, you and I are not the only two in this state that are concerned about this. There are initiatives that are being discussed in the legislature now. I think there are public groups that are also discussing some alternatives. They don't come easily. The United States Supreme Court has a case called Citizens United that equates speech with money, and so there are difficulties in regulating some of this. But that doesn't mean that it is an impossible challenge. Some initiatives would include things like taking a look at how justices are elected. Should we stay with the kind of election that we have now? Some states have a process very different than ours. You're appointed by the governor or even the legislature. Virginia, for instance, has a process where the legislature appoints. So there are ways of looking at how justices are selected, the length of term.
Do you support any of those changes that you just outlined?
I support looking at all of those changes.
Security has also become a growing threat. The State Budget Committee recently rejecting a proposal to create a new law enforcement agency with new staff specifically for the courts. How serious are the threats that justices and judges are facing here in the state?
We take them very seriously because they are serious threats. Judges should not have to be in a situation where they're concerned for their personal safety when they are rendering decisions. And that equation, concern for our personal safety, is very much present in some of the cases. Judicial security is very important because it is part of what I call the independence of the judiciary. Judges shouldn't be in a situation where they are intimidated or threatened because of their decisions. And yet that is part of the public dialogue right now.
Have you been afraid for your safety? Have you been threatened as you?
Sure. Yes.
How scary is that?
End of discussion. I don't want to go into the details, but we have, it's ongoing, and for some of the justices more than others.
A fascinating conversation. The Chief Justice's term officially ends July 31st. Justice-elect Crawford sworn in August 1st.
Coming up, those security concerns front and center at the Capitol and increased presence after the Minnesota shootings. Now the Republican lawmaker calling for more and his opposition to the Republican budget. State Senator Chris Kapenga is standing by next.